Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Doremus, your podcast host, and welcome to the first episode of Happenings at High Meadows. I'm here with Head of School Lisa Baker. Lisa, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
This podcast is going to tell our viewers and our listeners all about the magic of High Meadows School. And I know I'm biased, but it is quite simply one of the most wonderful places on earth. But before we dive in, I'd love for everyone to understand your educational background and how it is you wound up in Roswell, Georgia on 42 acres of beautiful woods, forests, and rolling meadows.
And how much time do we have, Greg? All right, let me try to...
the condensed version, Lisa.
I'll try to make it small. All right. I started teaching when I was 9 years old. I started teaching because I had mastered all of the swimming things, and I was the kid on the side of the pool who everybody just got annoyed by, and eventually they found a way to give me a job. So the job was to take the smallest children and figure out how to get them comfortable in the water. And I really think that was my very first sort of calling to working with kids. Even as a kid, I wanted to be a part of helping people become more comfortable in a place that they were uncomfortable. Because I knew that if they could gain comfort, now as a 9-year-old, obviously I wasn't thinking all of these things, right? As a 9-year-old, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Some grown-up thinks it's okay for me to help a younger kid. But in retrospect, I think I still hold on to that. I hold on to this real sense that, honestly, anyone can do anything if you can set the context for them enough. So I don't mean be an Olympic swimmer, but I mean be comfortable in the water and be a good swimmer and be a strong swimmer and be fit, because you can be in the water and be comfortable in this other environment. And I think that my life experience is literally what's led me here. It wasn't that I was looking specifically for Roswell, Georgia. It wasn't that I was looking specifically to lead and serve in a school that was committed to the things that High Meadows is committed to. I think it's that my life experience put me in a position to best serve a place like High Meadows. And High Meadows is about experience. It is about understanding ourselves within the context of other people. So, for example, I grew up as a young person in a completely different culture. So I grew up in Costa Rica. In the first 6-7 years of my life, I spent in a completely different culture. And again, I was very young, but I remember vividly what it felt like to not look like everybody else. I remember vividly what it felt like to not speak the language that everybody was speaking around me, or not have parents who looked like all the other parents. You know, I was growing up as sort of a space of other, and I think that helped me understand in a much more visceral way what it is when you don't feel like you fit in, and how powerful it is when you are truly invited, right? Truly welcome, truly included, truly honored, truly heard. That when that starts to happen, you can do anything. So one of the stories that I used to tell my kids, because at one point, so from all those things, I worked in Montgomery County Public Schools. I was a teacher. I started as a middle school English teacher doing interdisciplinary teaching and learning. I moved to a high school in Montgomery County. I was an English chair. I was a guidance counselor. I ran a school for kids in drug and alcohol recovery. And I finished my career in Montgomery County after about 17 years working in professional development. So working as sort of asking the question, how within a school can we put job-embedded professional development into a school to best support instruction and teaching? Right? So then I moved to independent schools, and my first independent school was the Roper School in Michigan, and I worked there for 10 years as the upper school head. Learned a ton about gifted education. And again, gifted is just another example where people think if a kid is gifted, they're special, they They're somehow supposed to, like, get everything easily, or think they're better than other people, and they're not. Like, truly gifted kids and adults don't function that way. That's not how they feel. It's not about a test score. It's about how their lives exist. So in Costa Rica, when I was about 6, there were these kids who, Costa Rican kids, didn't go to school with, because I went to an international school, and they were in the neighborhood. And we bumped into each other, and we did not speak the same language. But we discovered we wanted to play. And so we discovered there was a mango tree in my front yard. And we, on that particular day, we climbed the mango tree. And it was really fun. We had no common language, but we had the language of play, right? We had a desire to come together and figure out how we could enjoy time together, right? And so we had a really good time. And we climbed the mango tree, and at the end of it, we wanted to do it again. So we were trying to figure out I was trying to figure out, how can I get these kids to come back? Right? I was the eldest of 3 kids, so everybody else was a baby. My sister was an infant. So I was like looking for friends, I think. And I said to these 3 kids, why don't we meet after school? So I kind of figured out the Spanish words for school, and they were like, no. And I realized in the moment that I had never seen them walking to school, or in retrospect, I don't think they were in formal schooling. So that didn't work. So I tried 3 o'clock, and that also didn't work. Like, how can I? And so it was the rainy season in Costa Rica. And the rainy season in Costa Rica, everything is, skies are mostly blue and beautiful, and then all of a sudden it rains a torrent, like a downpour, for an hour and a half, and then it just stops and clears up, and the sun comes out again. And you could almost set your watch to it. And so I said to these kids, let's meet when the rain stops. And we all understood that. We all had a clear understanding of when the rain would stop. We could all watch it. We all understood it. So when I was 6 years old, I learned that if you have people who are completely different from you, who don't speak your language, but you want to do something together, you can always find a way. And so I used to tell that story to my high school students when I was a counselor and a coach and a high school principal. Used to tell that story because I think I actually had a red rubber ball in my office because it symbolized for me that if you have this object that you want to play with and have fun around, you can almost always find that if everybody is interested in that same activity.
That is a wonderful, heartwarming story, Lisa. Thank you for sharing. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the common language of play, mm-hmm. which is a beautiful thing. And at High Meadows, all of our students from pre-K 3 all the way up through 8th grade have ample access to free, unstructured play. We call it Meadow Time. And one of the beautiful things when I started here, having an office outside of pre-K, was just hearing the squeals and the laughter and the constant joy as they are on that playground. Can you explain to our listeners the importance of play-based education and having a connection to nature?
Sure. I think it's different at every age. I think it is very comfortable for people when children are younger. People see the value in it when kids are in pre-K and they're on the playground, right? And they see the glee and the fun, and they see when the kindergartners or our kindergartners are about 60% of the time outdoors and in the woods, and we use our 42 acres for them to literally be in what they refer to as the deep woods, in more of a forest-informed kindergarten program. I think that what gets discounted sometimes is how that play continues to be important and to change as kids get older. So it's meadow time is this marvelous time where we have 45 minutes to an hour where there's lunch and there is time for, as you said, free play. And it's free play that's unstructured, and it's free play also that's multi-age. So it is nothing, it doesn't say that this is the play where the kindergartners play, or this is the play where the first graders play. Now, there is a little bit of structure in terms of where kids can go, and there's a lot of observation of where people are, but kids are away from the adults, and they are working out the challenges that they are having. Fort building is a perfect example. Like resources. Who took my resources? Who moved my fort? Who gets to design the fort? Who gets to build here? And so there may be, for example, one day I covered, that particular area during meadow time. And all I was doing was sitting on a bench in the woods, watching kids figure out the way they wanted both to structure forts, the materials they wanted to use to build their fort. There were some disagreements about who could build where, and at one point a child came over to me and said, "Ms. Baker, I think we need a little bit of help." So I was able to go over and just say, what's the situation? But rather than inserting myself into telling kids what they could do or couldn't do, I asked them what their rules were. I asked them what their understanding of what could happen or what couldn't happen was. And there was a misunderstanding around how many days a fort would lay fallow before somebody else could come along and take the materials and make it theirs. And there was one group that thought it was 3 days. And the other group thought it was a week and a half. And so automatically, that's a difference, right? Like, I'm going to completely disagree about that. That is, when you look at what adults need to do in the world, so when you think about childhood as this really distinct period of time in our own development, it ends, right? Childhood eventually ends. Now, I would argue my childhood mostly hasn't ended because I refuse it. I refuse to give it up. Like, I refuse to give up the joy of learning
Amen.
something new. I refuse to give up the sense that, of course, we can get along and why can't we figure it out, right? But when you look into the adult world and you look at where people need to be and what they need to work on and what they need to, figure out and experience, and it's the disagreement about, well, I thought the rule was I couldn't touch it in 3 days, and you thought the rule was I couldn't touch it in a week and a half. And now we're arguing, but we don't understand the baseline. And if you can build the baseline, watching these kids realize what the misunderstanding was, I just took steps backwards. Because once they had identified the misunderstanding, and they had identified that there was one child who was like, "But I've been planning it. I've been planning this for a week with my friend. Let me go get my friend so he can tell you how we've been planning this," right? So it wasn't active building, it was planning. All of these little idiosyncrasies. So when you see it, you think, "Oh, isn't that cute? Kids get to build forts in the woods. Isn't that nice?" It is nice. It is fun. It is wonderful. It is hard. It is challenging. And it is crucial. That's the thing that people don't realize. It's crucial. When you think about learning as an adult and all the access that we have to information as adults, and what we can learn if we are continuously interested, as opposed to waiting for someone to tell us what to do or waiting for a direction. As adults, all of a sudden we have access to all sorts of information. We can invent ourselves and relearn if we keep that sense of play. If you shut that down for children when they're supposed to be doing it, when the world says childhood is about play, and you make it age-based, you stop their play in their thinking. So when you go to our middle school and you stand outside our middle school building at the beginning of the day, you will watch kids playing in ways that in other middle schools you will not see. And that is so important. They are playing, sometimes they're playing Foursquare, sometimes they're playing a game they just made up, sometimes they're playing with an idea that they had about their debate program, sometimes they're quizzing each other on something, but they are in the act of play, self-directed. And as soon as they need to transition and move, I watched it just yesterday. I watched Matt Nuttall, our middle years principal, stick his head right outside the door and say, I think literally it was as simple as, hey, we're getting started. And these 8 middle school kids who are all engaged in play and fun and discussion and activity shifted immediately and moved immediately into the commons to start their assembly. That's all it took. And that's partly because we are giving kids at every age the opportunity both to play but also to manage themselves. And when we give them sort of a faith in themselves and a sense of themselves, and we honor that, when the administrator or the teacher says, hey, we're getting started, they know what that means. It's not some like big top-down thing, but it's respected. And they move into the commons and then they start their assembly. So, and it's not to say it's perfect, right? Like, I don't ever want anyone to believe that because we do what we do, everything is easy. Because it's not. Sometimes there's a kerfluffle over something, and we have to work it out, right? But giving these kids this tool, giving them a chance to play with ideas, to write plays, to have free play in multiple spaces so it's at meadow time, it's at snack time, it's when people just are 2-3 team. Just the other day, I walked out and 2 or 3 of our 2nd and 3rd grade classes are playing a game in the commons. Not the commons, but the courtyard outside. And I said, what's going on? And they're like, we needed a brain break. So all the kids knew they had a 10-minute brain break, and they went outside and they moved their bodies. What we know about how our brains and our bodies are connected, what that does for learning, what that does for all of us. If we move more, we think better. Bilateral movement while you're trying to learn something or memorize something puts the information in your head better. Did you know that? If you tap your arms like this before you read and drink a glass of water, your brain will work better. Like, we're just doing these things naturally, and we're using the environment that we have. We're using the history of the school, right, which was founded by people who said kids need to learn from nature and from each other, and we have to give them space for their childhood to honor that. We continue to honor that here. And so I think play is easily described just as like when kids have a ball or are swinging on a tire swing, and that is play, but there is also this academic, mindful play that our kids get into as well. And I think both things complement each other in a really marvelous way.
That's tremendous. And first of all, kerfluffle is a great word, and I want to challenge everybody listening to this or watching this to use that in a sentence or a written piece at least one time this week. So there you go. That's your challenge for the week. I love that you mentioned the group of middle schoolers playing outside. And by the way, you stole my next question talking about the academic benefits. Yeah. But every Tuesday morning from the crosswalk, I watch them play Foursquare, play with the football, whatever it may be, dunking an imaginary basketball. Yeah. And it just brings me such joy because, for the record, I tried to do that at a different school at their age. And I got told, come inside, we can't supervise you on the swing.
That's right.
And I just love that they get that freedom to be a kid. It is one of the things that drew me to High Meadows, is that it is a distinct phase of life. It's not just honored in pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, those younger years, but it is valued all the way through 8th grade. Academically, our students have such a blend of being inside and being outside, and even being able to take those lessons that at a typical school, quote unquote, you'd see at a desk and a chair, take them outside. And it's not just spit out answers on a worksheet after a teacher has finished a lesson, but it's inquiry-based driven. what are the tenets of inquiry-based driven, and how does that play a role in academics every day at High Meadows School?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with our approach in terms of being a progressive school. So we believe that students need to start from their question. So inquiry is really question, right? So, we have the biggest example of it happening right now with emphasis. Over the next 2 weeks, everyone is just studying one topic, and no one knew what it was until yesterday. So that is the biggest example of everyone, teachers included. Teachers didn't know what it was either. They didn't know the topic. But that is our biggest example of it. The smaller examples are when you begin to study something, when you begin to be curious about something, your brain becomes more interested the more you allow curiosity for children, for any of us, adults included, right? If you tell someone these are the 3 things you have to know, they will learn those 3 things because they want to prove to you that they know the 3 things, and they then want like credit, a grade, a gold star, something tangible. It's very transactional. So that education becomes transactional. And so rather than thinking, I had a question, or even my teacher had a question, so we start all of our PYP units with a provocation. So sort of the provocation being, what provokes us to consider this? What are the factors that we should be thinking about? What that does is it opens up a loop for children and for learners overall that they hold on to for the rest of their lives. And that loop is this learning loop, like, I wonder, Craig, what's a question you've had random? What's the most random question you've had in the last week?
The most random question I've had in the last week. How to best clean up the environment, specifically looking at the shore and the oceans.
There you go. So if you are curious about that, you now have a way to say, okay, so what I just heard is like ocean and water, right? So you're really interested in, which means your next question would likely be, what's your next question from that?
What materials would I need? What groups could I get involved with? Simply where to start.
Where to start. And if I were your teacher, I would say, what do you think is in there?
I would tell you, especially trying to think at that age, probably animals.
All right, so there are animals in there. What do you think we would need to know before we cleaned it up?
What type of animals? What's harming them? What do they love? What do we want to make sure that we protect?
All right, so I'm doing that with you as a grown-up, right?
Yes.
You're probably more nervous than most kids are. We're also like being filmed and all those things, right? But when you give children the chance to dive into those questions, they begin a loop. And so your loop was, I want to do something. So you know there's a problem and you know you want to do something, right? My most recent question was, how do I take this quilt that I'm trying to make and put an edge on it? And I have someone in my house who has done that before. So my wife is like, well, there's one way, and then there's this other way, and then there's this other way. And I'm like, oh, okay, but I'm trying to do it all. And she could probably just sit down and do it by herself, but she's being very patient with me. And there is something called a whip stitch. And I hear the word whip stitch somewhere in a shop somewhere. And I'm like, whip stitch. That must be how you do this. So I do a little on a whip stitch. And I watched 3 different videos on the whip stitch to try to figure out what the heck is going on, right? Like, how do I do this? And then I begin. I am telling you, Craig, that if I had not had the opportunity to think and plan and consider and how do I problem solve this with a belief that I could do this thing? It's not a pretty quilt. I'm not like it's It's not going
I'm
to win
sure
any,
it's beautiful, Lisa.
It's not going to win
Let's
any,
give you some credit for
It's
sure.
not going to win any prizes, right? But it's done. And it's a symbol for me of love, right? Because love is what we do. It's our action. It's starting, Craig.
For the record, I called that. I said she's going to cry, and she said she never knows when it's going to happen, but it probably will.
Yeah. As soon as I care deeply, it starts. It's just a symbol. So there is. So people talk at High Meadows about magic, right? So it is a magical place. And it is a magical place. And it is a magical place partly because we have this gorgeous 42-acre campus. And it is a magical place because we have such joy. And the kids are joyful. But that almost feels like an accident, right? Like magic is an accident. If you actually talk to a magician, no magician will ever tell you that magic is an accident, right? Magic takes work. It takes effort. But there's this special sauce that we should be looking for in schools. We should be looking for in any school, anywhere. You should be asking, what is distinctly different about you? And that's what's different about independent schools. Every independent school ought to be able to tell you, what is their special thing? We all have relationship. We all have curriculum. We all care that kids can learn and read and write and think, but how you do it and what you give kids in the end that sustains them, but when they leave you, right, which sustains them as learners for the rest of their lives, that's what independent schools really need to be doing. This school does that because we love them. And love is an action. Love is a verb. Support is a verb. We support them. We really try to figure out for every single solitary kid what their magic is, what they need. And sometimes that's they need clarity about the impact they're having on other people because they need to change some behaviors, right? Sometimes it's that they have some great ideas and they're afraid to bring them out, and we need to sort of get the other kids to sort of quiet down for a minute and realize they have a peer who has a great idea. And what you see in kids as they get older is they get better at saying, like a kid might have said to you, Craig, I know you've got that look on your face like you're thinking. What are you thinking about right now, right? You watch kids do that for themselves. It's not always teacher-driven. So this loop of learning, this sense that the question, so your question to me was about inquiry. Right? Inquiry-based means that no matter what we're teaching, and we are teaching content and we are teaching skill. So we are very clear about what our curricular arc is. We know what skills we want them to have. We know when kids are behind. We know what to do about that. We know what help they need, right? And we work and partner with parents to get kids the help they need. So it's not just like this is some sort of free-for-all place where nothing is written, everything is written down. But when you watch it, it looks just like freedom. So figuring out how we work that inquiry, right? How we get kids to think about how they are provoked to consider something, how they are provoked to action, how they are provoked to solution, to creativity, right? That's what an inquiry model does, as opposed to a more transactional model, which is what I'm seeing more and more and more and more in education, and more as kids get older, that this is purely transaction. I, as the instructor or teacher, am asking you to do A, B, and C. You, as the student, are asking how you do A, B, and C at a high enough level to get the grade that will get you the next thing, right? Which will be entrance into some college or university, and then you think, erroneously believe, that somehow that piece of paper makes the rest of the world for you. That is a mistake, because that is not how it works. We have to constantly be iterating, thinking, as grown-ups, as adults. We have to be constantly iterating, inventing, creating. And so if we can make that model and make that like a part of a kid's DNA, then no matter where they go and no matter what they do, they're going to be better for themselves and they're going to be better for the world.
Better for themselves and better for the world. You heard it from our head of school, Lisa Baker. If you'd love to learn more about our pre-K through 8th grade school situated on 42 acres of historic farm property in Roswell, Georgia, I encourage you to visit www.highmeadows.org/visit to schedule your campus tour today. We can't wait to meet you. Lisa, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Craig. It's been great to be here.